Brian James, born Brian Robertson, February 18, 1955 and died March 6, 2025, was an English punk rock guitarist, who was best known for being a founding member of the Damned as well as of the Lords of the New Church. His career spanned decades, cementing his place as a central figure in the evolution of punk rock. Known for his unique style, powerful performances, and creativity, Brian James was at the forefront of numerous musical movements, inspiring generations of musicians along the way. While he may not have achieved the same household name recognition as some of his peers, James' impact on the punk scene was undeniable. From his early beginnings in the music world to his later ventures into solo projects and collaborations, Brian James built a legacy that continues to influence modern rock and punk music. Net worth. Brian James had a successful career spanning multiple decades, but as with many artists in the punk and alternative scenes, his financial earnings were often difficult to quantify. Unlike mainstream pop stars, punk musicians rarely amassed the same level of wealth, as their music was often more about artistic expression than commercial success. However, through his time with the Damned, his solo work, and his collaborations, James built a respectable net worth. While estimates of his net worth varied, it was believed to be in the range of $2 million to $5 million. This wealth came from album sales, royalties, live performances, and his various musical ventures over the years. James' long career earned him respect within the music industry and a loyal fan base that continued to support his work. Houses and lifestyle. While Brian James' personal lifestyle remained private, it was known that he spent time living in various places throughout his career. The constant touring lifestyle of a musician meant that James rarely stayed in one place for too long. Whether living in London or Los Angeles, his living arrangements were typically centered around his work. In terms of luxury, Brian James was not known to indulge in extravagant lifestyles, unlike some of his more commercially successful peers. Instead, his life was largely focused on music, with fewer public details available about his real estate holdings or lavish properties. That being said, James showed that he valued the freedom to create and perform above material wealth, embracing the punk ethos of rejecting the mainstream and focusing on authenticity over luxury. Despite his somewhat modest lifestyle, Brian James' music continued to leave a lasting impact on the culture, inspiring musicians and fans alike to value creativity, individuality, and the spirit of rebellion that defined punk rock. Early life. Brian James was born Brian Robson on February 18, 1955, in Croydon, London, a working-class area. Growing up in post-war Britain, James was surrounded by a rich musical environment that shaped his artistic sensibilities. His early exposure to rock and roll, particularly to artists like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, played a significant role in cultivating his love for music. However, it wasn't just mainstream rock that caught his attention. Brian James was especially drawn to the raw, rebellious energy of early punk bands like the Stooges and the New York Dolls. By the age of 16, James was already playing guitar. His teenage years were marked by experimentation with different bands, as he honed his skills and developed his own musical identity. In the mid-1970s, the British punk movement began to gain momentum, and Brian James found himself at the forefront of this revolution, initially as a member of the Damned. Personal life. Brian James was known to be a private individual, and not much was publicly known about his personal life. However, it was known that he was passionate about his music and had always prioritized his career over celebrity status. His commitment to his craft led him to live a somewhat unconventional life, often on the move and performing around the world. Over the years, James maintained a relatively low profile when not performing, preferring to keep his personal life away from the limelight. While he was a celebrated musician, he did not typically seek the attention that came with fame. This desire for privacy and focus on music was one of the defining characteristics of his persona. Career. James began his musical career playing in several proto-punk bands including London SS and the Subterraneans, in addition to glam rock band Bastard. James moved on to The Damned, writing almost all the material on their first two albums, Damned, Damned, Damned and Music for Pleasure, before leaving at the end of 1977. In the following years, James formed the short-lived Tans de Youth together with Andy Colquhoun on bass, Hawkwind and Chicken Shack's Alan Powell on drums and Tony Moore, previously of Iron Maiden, on keyboards. They toured with Black Sabbath on the Never Say Die tour and released the single I'm Sorry /Delay in 1978. James then played in Iggy Pop's solo touring band, 1979, and recorded his first two solo singles, Ain't That a Shame, 1979, and Why? 1982, both with Stuart Copeland on drums. He also guested on proto-punk forerunners The Saints' 1982 album, Out in the Jungle. He would later co-found and play in the Lords of the New Church with Stiv Bators. The band recorded 3 studio albums and 1 EP, along with several live albums, from 1982 until their breakup in 1989. James reunited with The Damned for 2 shows at the London Town and Country Club UK, now renamed O2 Forum Kentish Town, in June 1988. Over a decade after his first solo single, he used the time without a band to record his eponymous solo debut album for the New Rose label in 1990. It featured longtime collaborators Malcolm Mortimer on drums and Alan Lee Shaw on bass. From 1992 to 1996, James then played guitar with the Brussels-based band The Dripping Lips. In 1992, he was invited by Scottish vocalist Robbie Kilman to co-write the soundtrack for the film Abracadabra, directed by Harry Cleven. The subsequent soundtrack album, produced by Kilman, was released in Benelux by EMI/Indisc. The band was composed by Robbie Kilman on vocals, James on guitar, Alan Lee Shaw on bass and Paul Zoll, ex-Flaming Groovies, on drums. Kilman brought in his friend and record producer Jimmy Miller to helm their second album, Ready to Crack. Shaw had moved on to play guitar in The Damned, and Nico Manci replaced him on bass. In 2001, James recorded the album Mad for the Racket with MC5's Wayne Kramer, guitar, Duff McKagan, bass, Stuart Copeland and Clem Burke, drums, as Racketeers. Following that, James, together with Dave Tregunna, reformed the Lords of the New Church in 2002 to 2003 with vocalist Adam Bigvare. The lineup recorded the 10-song unreleased CD Hang On and toured Europe in spring of that year. When this incarnation of the Lords was over and done, Brian formed another solo outfit, the Brian James Gang. With Brian James on vocals and guitar, the remaining rhythm section of Dave Tregunna, bass, and Steve Murray, drums, the band was completed by Austin Gayton as additional guitarist. Within a year, they released the single New Rose 2006 and a self-titled full-length album. In 2012, he released a solo acoustic album Chateau Brian with former Lords of the New Church touring keyboard player Mark Taylor. In 2013, he revisited the material he played in his Damned years, both live by performing throughout the UK with Damned bandmate Rat Scabies and by re-recording 9 Damned songs for his third solo album, Damned If I Do. In 2015, he released a new studio album, The Guitars That Dripped Blood, which features guest appearances from Cheetah Chrome and Adam Bigvare. In October 2022, James reunited with Scabies, Sensible and Vanian for 5 Damned shows in the UK. James died on March 6, 2025, at the age of 70. Conclusion. Brian James was a man of substance, known for his contributions to the punk rock world. He may not have had the high-profile lifestyle of some of his contemporaries, but his music spoke volumes. From his early days with The Damned to his various other projects, James remained dedicated to his craft, leaving an indelible mark on the history of rock music. With his undeniable talent, dedication to authenticity, and a career full of passion, Brian James' legacy was one of musical integrity. While the specifics of his personal life remained private, his contributions to punk rock were far-reaching, and he continued to influence musicians and fans around the world. In a world often driven by fame and fortune, Brian James stayed true to the spirit of punk, creating music that mattered, not for wealth or status, but for its raw energy and emotional resonance. Rest in peace, Brian James. You may have gone, but you will never be forgotten.